Hello, and welcome to my What If series, featuring some key changes I would make to fix the Star Wars sequel trilogy. This is part 2 of this series, so if you haven't seen part 1, go check that out, and I'll leave a link in the description for it below. In my last video, we imagined what would happen if Luke would have caught the lightsaber in the forest on Starkiller Base at the end of Force Awakens. This is a moment that has far-reaching implications for the rest of the trilogy, and we'll continue to speculate wildly about what could have happened as a result of this story change, as well as a couple new key changes to the second installment. At the end of The Force Awakens in my What If scenario, Luke comes to rescue Rey, Finn, and Chewie from Kylo in an epic conclusion that the whole movie was building towards, which was to find Luke to get his help in restoring peace to the galaxy. Continuing on with my version after Luke enters the picture at the end of Force Awakens, we'll proceed by imagining what the story could have been with two new changes that I think would also help fix the sequel trilogy. Namely, what would have happened if Rey joined Kylo at the end of Episode 8, and what if Finn discovers he's Force-sensitive? Significant changes, I know. Let's enter this realm of possibility. By restoring Luke to his rightful place in this trilogy, Rey's training is set up perfectly for the next installment. After suffering a defeat at the hands of Kylo Ren, it is clear Rey needs training to be able to face him again. So at the beginning of this movie, Luke would begin training with Rey on Ahch-To. It still seems like an interesting place that he could have found in his travels. What I always liked about the Legends books was Luke's journey to find out more about the Jedi of the past. He received training with Obi-Wan and Yoda about the Force, however there was so much about the Jedi they didn't tell him. And I very much enjoyed reading about his quest to find whatever information he could about the Jedi as he took on apprentices of his own. So it would make sense for Luke's absence to be explained by the fact that he was in pursuit of knowledge of perhaps both the Sith and the Jedi, or other Force users that predated them both. Perhaps he hopes to learn something that would help him to save his nephew from whatever dark force has corrupted him. His long absence could also be explained by the fact that he had to go into hiding after his academy was destroyed, along with all his students. But far from giving up on Ben and the rest of the galaxy, I feel that he would do his best to investigate the seemingly sudden rise of the dark side and its hold on his nephew. It wouldn't be that hard to imagine that Luke began to see visions of the future that gave him hope. And after the events at Starkiller Base, it became clear to him that it was time for him to return, as Luke would definitely feel the Force awakening and possibly acting in a way to restore balance. Visions of the future are fluid, however, as Yoda said in Empire.
Difficult to see. Always in motion is the future.
Luke sees a new hope in Rey, though at the same time he also sees conflict within her. And it should be clear throughout Episode 8 that Reys Path could lead her either to the light side or the dark side. From what we saw in The Last Jedi, Rey continued to display dark side tendencies. She very much would react purely off of emotion with a lightsaber first to ask questions later approach. Also, while entering a Force meditation on Ahch-To, she found a dark side cave and without hesitation went for it to see what secrets it held. And she couldn't stop thinking about what she could find out about herself by going there. This scene, of course, is similar to Luke's entering the cave on Dagobah. Luke failed his test because he went in with his weapon. Yoda said Luke would find only what he took with him, and Luke, filled with fear, took his weapons. And what he did find was himself, if he continued on that path of fear, anger, and self-doubt. Now in The Last Jedi, Rey had a similar test, though there were no consequences to her actions, and it revealed nothing about her intentions because there was no character development in this movie. She went there because she was so single-minded in her pursuit to find out if the dark side of the Force could reveal anything about her past and her identity. She wanted the quick and easy way to find out. There should have been consequences to this, and she should have experienced failure. She's exhibited frustration, anger, and disappointment. It would be very interesting to pursue the consequences for this. This, I feel, could actually lead her to clashing with Luke under his training, and to end up feeling disappointed by the legend of the Jedi. After all, if they were so powerful, then how could the Empire and the First Order rise under their rule? She could question whether she's cut out to be a Jedi, and all throughout this time she is having Force-bond conversations with Kylo, who was also filled with conflict and turmoil, struggling with what he thought was his path and how he views Snoke. and he could begin to see a kindred spirit in Rey, and start to see her as a valuable ally to him in his pursuit of his vision for the galaxy. So yes, some obvious tweaking here with Rey actually receiving training and experiencing setbacks, while also seeing Luke as the Grand Master he is. And everything else pretty much stays the same, leading up to the scene where Kylo offers Rey his hand. At this point, her mind is filled with conflicting emotions. I of course would change the dialogue here during their standoff to coincide with what has been established previously with these changes. Luke would probably come up in this conversation. Kylo might say that Luke is holding her back, and he knows who she is and where she comes from, and that Luke kept it from her. Kylo would never do that, and he would bring out that he's always been honest with her. Then his line about leaving behind the Jedi and the Sith and forging a new path would seem very intriguing to her. Rey would feel like this would be an opportunity for them both to start anew. All of this conflict that they felt throughout this movie would lead to this moment. It feels like they were destined to come together, so ultimately, she takes his hand. This is definitely a wildly conflicting moment, and at this point we have no idea what the implications could be. But you have to admit, this is a way more interesting ending. But is all hope lost?
No. There is another.
Yes, since it's confirmed in Episode 9 that Finn is Force sensitive, how much more interesting would it have been to discover that in Episode 8? So let's break down what's been going on with Finn while all this has been happening. So at the beginning of Episode 8, Luke and Rey have left for her training, and while Finn is in his coma-like state, recovering after being severely wounded by Kylo, he begins to have visions. Visions of the past, of places he's never been before, glimpses of a stormtrooper training, and Phasma coming for him. He then jolts awake. It seems symbolic in the sense that the Force has also awakened in him, though he doesn't realize it yet. And while Luke and Rey are gone, the Resistance ends up on the run again from the First Order. General Hux, still as menacing as he appeared in The Force Awakens, is determined to wipe them all out. Their fleet manages to escape, though not without losses or setbacks. Their forces are greatly diminished. In my version, Leia would not be injured in the attack, and thus we don't have to sit through that awful flying Leia scene.
I'm very poppin', y'all!
After the attack, there's a briefing, and Leia reveals that there is a spy within the Resistance. Someone has given away their precise location and relayed it to the enemy. They must be very careful with how they handle information, and the spy must be fleshed out before they begin to search for a new base. So Finn's character has been woefully underutilized in the Disney trilogy, so to have him be on a truly meaningful mission would be a great opportunity for character development for him and Poe. Yes, Poe and Finn would have to be on this mission together, so no Rose Tico in my version. But what is key to this installment is that Finn needs to have a vital part to the story. He needs to come to terms with his identity and be resolved to fight for the Resistance. And obviously there's a bunch of little details that would need to be worked out with this new story in regards to Finn and Poe's mission. I also feel like Phasma should have had a bigger and more menacing role, perhaps specifically targeting Finn throughout the movie out of revenge. Perhaps the spy could actually turn out to be Phasma in a stealth ship, a la Boba Fett's Slave One secretly tracking their fleet, and this could be revealed later after Poe and Finn put a plan together to flesh out the spy. Finn and Phasma's final confrontation could still happen. I think that'd be important to his development, and I feel that during their final battle would be the opportune moment for it to be confirmed that Finn is indeed Force sensitive. Phasma would likely gain the upper hand, perhaps knocking his weapon out of his hand and pinning him, and she could begin to taunt Finn, saying he'll always be FN-2187, and that he's nothing more than a bug in the system. You know, your basic bad guy monologuing. Anyways. Finn's not having it because there's been some character development. He feels like he knows himself, and that he's no longer the product of the First Order's conditioning. So in this confrontation, he strains to reach his weapon, and it moves the rest of the way into his hand. Phasma's caught off guard, and he takes the opportunity to strike her down, thus ridding them of the spy and allowing the Resistance to jump away to safety. At the end of the movie, Luke and Leia reunite at the Resistance's new hidden base, and Luke tells her what happened with Kylo and Rey. He felt a great disturbance in the Force when Snoke died, but he still feels the strong presence of the dark side growing. It seems Snoke was not the source of this darkness, just another puppet being manipulated. So much is unsure, it seems that Kylo and now Rey are closer to the darkness than ever, but all hope is not lost. Poe and Finn arrive, and Luke now senses the Force in Finn. I feel that working around these main story points could have drastically improved the overall plot of the sequel trilogy, and avoided many elements that greatly annoyed the fans. Things such as running out of ship fuel and the Holdo maneuver would never happen, and we could skip Canto Blight altogether, thank goodness. This would also help to show significant development of the main characters, something that these movies were severely lacking. And a story with somewhat of a cliffhanger like this would have kept us excited for the next movie, which couldn't be said about how many of the fans felt after seeing The Last Jedi. I hope you enjoyed this video. In part 3 of the series, we'll again continue with these story threads and build upon it with another significant change I would make to improve the sequel trilogy. This is just some of what I've imagined to fix this trilogy, but let me know your thoughts. Is there anything you would like to have seen that could improve the sequel trilogy? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for listening, and while you're here, please leave a like and subscribe. Thanks so much for your support, and as always, have a very nerdy day.